It's time for Stock Picks. We are serving up some analysis from the poultry industry today with a look at Quantum Foods, Rainbow Chicken and Astral Foods. Here to break down these companies for us is Marc Hassenfuss from Financial Mail. Marc, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. So this industry really being under the spotlight for quite some time. We've had issues around the avian flu, higher costs, and a lot of corporate action taking place. Before we get into the individual stocks, just take us through your general reading, your general sentiments around the sector.
Well, it's certainly not, in terms of investing, one of my favorite sectors. It's either very lean or very fat. And I think it leans to the former, as you just mentioned there, avian flu, there's Newcastle disease, there's all these things that hit the poultry industry. When they do well, they do very, very well, but things have got to line up for that. So it's a difficult industry to invest in. You've got to understand the cycles well. I think some of my older friends probably think they've worked out. They don't always get it right, but it's a commodity-driven industry. It's not an easy one to invest in, and it's certainly not an easy sector to operate in either.
And you mentioned not an easy industry to operate in. I mean, looking at Astral Foods' trading update that is out today paints a really different picture from the previous period, really dealing with a cocktail of negatives on that front. It's also had to account for a cybersecurity attack, of course, lower chicken prices, as well as higher input costs. And so it expects earnings to come in lower. Just walk me through your analysis on this counter.
I suppose just looking at that trading update, what I take out of that is you've got to kind of work out the permutations there, but if you strip out the feed profits from the first half and you look at what they've come up with, the poultry margins are very, very thin. It's but a sliver. So it's been a really tough period for them. As they said, and there's no pricing power at all. I don't know if the extraneous factors there, because you've got Daybreak, we know they're in trouble. Are they pushing birds out at a cheaper price as well to kind of compound the problem? I honestly don't know. There's obviously the high feed cost that came from the hot weather last year. That will, I suppose, drift out of the system. But for now, it's pain. It doesn't look good. You saw the Rainbow share price going down in sympathy. So at this point, it's kind of scary on the numbers. But I do think if you're an investor, it's probably time to be looking, because, as you know, things do change quickly. And if they do, who knows?
And I guess the new CEO, Gary Arnold, really taking up that top job in a very difficult time.
Yeah. He's been an insider there for a while, I think for at least 13, 14 years in senior roles, being the COO lately. So I think it's, handing over the reins to a good, solid operator is what they needed. Replacing Chris Skitter, not going to be easy. Mr. Poultry himself, no-nonsense operator, huge respect for him. He's been through the toughest of times. He's just incredibly stoic and a good operator. So, I think the management team below him, I don't think you can underestimate them either. So I think Astral's still a good company for tough times, but it's got to get to those tough times.
All right, the next company we're looking at is Rainbow Chicken. That company out with results about 2 weeks ago. Earnings on that front surging as it recovered from, those losses associated with the bird flu. But they did, raise or rather warn that, the bird flu risks are still around, and that there's also pressure around vaccinations, Marc.
Yeah, it's not only that. I think just industry, same things that are affecting Astral are going to affect them.
Yes.
So you saw, obviously, the share price dropping today. Before that, the share price is a week after results because the outlook not great. Having said that, the CEO there for a while now, Martina Stander, he's ex-Country Birds. I'd say similar to Chris Skitter, knows what he's doing. He knows he's running a chicken business. He's very good at it. And you can see the change he's made. So Rainbow's in a much better space. It's pity the space they're in is not better.
Yeah.
Looking at Rainbow's share price today, goodness, I might be a bit tempted at that thing drops below 3 Rand. It's looking quite attractive. As I say, Martinez is a good operator. He's doing all the right things. If the stars align, we get low feed costs, get a bit of pricing power. Rainbow could be a very interesting one to look at. As I say, it's streamlined, stripped out. But there's so many questions above the operations. What does Rainbow do? Do Rainbow keep their shares? Do they delist it? Do they buy it out? There is a rumor, very scurrilous rumor, that Rainbow might be looking at Daybreak. I'd be most surprised, and I wouldn't be happy if they did that. But there's that story out there as well. That's sitting on the share price, but as I say, it's a company in a much better shape than it was previously, so one to watch.
Yeah, and Rainbow Chicken, a company that's recently been unbundled as well. And, you know, sometimes I ask myself, is there room for another poultry player on the JSE? But I think there is, because you do seem a bit more positive around this counter.
Yeah, look, I don't know about other I think we're probably going to get less, if anything, to be honest with you, because I think the next stock we talk about, I can't see them staying around too long. I have my doubts that Daybreak will list in the current shape it's in. It needs a lot of work. And then the other small players, it'd be wonderful if Country Bird came back. That'd just be great. They used to be listed. It's a big company with interesting operations in Africa, interesting executives, and interesting strategy. I'm not sure they're coming back though. And there's Sovereign Foods, which is unlisted as well. And it used to be listed, another interesting company. But as I say, it's not a great space for poultry stocks. Do they really want to come back to the JSE and put up with a kind of swinging sentiment? I don't know. I don't think so.
All right, let's look at the next company, Quantum Foods. That group dealing with a lot of corporate governance issues late last year, which made headlines. But, let's look at the operational performance. It expects earnings to improve. Just your take on that counter, and then we'll look at how it fares against the other peers.
Yeah, look, it's very different to the others. It's got the curveball of eggs.
Yes.
And quite extensive African operations as well that change things. And it's a much smaller operator as well. So having said that, you've got to take a step back from Quantum and can't really compare to the others. But yeah, structurally, as you said, there have been some issues, not in the corporate governance. It's the shareholding that's the most interesting. There are, I think, now 4 or a handful of big shareholders. There's very small liquidity. So, is anyone actually watching the stock? In significant minorities, I doubt it. And I think most of the market's probably moved out of Quantum now. I think that thing's got a limited lifespan in the JSE, but nonetheless interesting, because if there is a buyout, they have to pay a price. And in fact, that's going to be the most interesting point, I think.
So is that something we're watching out for, perhaps a buyout of Quantum Foods?
Yeah, so the way it's stacking up, if I can remember correctly off the top of my head, you've got Country Birds there. They've got a biggish stake, I think, high teens. You've got Braemar, which is the Rutledge family, the Zimbabwean tobacco barons. And then you've got a private equity company called Silver Street, which also got a big holding. And very lately, you had Capital Works, who backed Sovereign Foods in their takeout when they moved off the JSE. Also got a big stake there, I think something like 15%. So some of those parties have got to align, and I think once they're aligned, I think they'll have to make an offer. Interestingly, Quantum does fit quite nicely with Sovereign. It gives them geographical expansion that's quite interesting. I think they need that. It fits very well with Country Birds as well because of their African markets. So it might be a bit of a push and pull to see who gets the bird there, but it doesn't seem to be happening right away. It just seems to be a kind of period of stasis where nothing's happening, but certainly something we'll have to give sooner rather than later.
All right, an interesting one to watch there. But stripping Quantum Foods, right? Let's stack up Astral and Rainbow Chickens. I know Astral is bigger than Rainbow, but which one would be looking more attractive at the current time?
I'm going to say Rainbow because I think Rainbow is also being held down by legacy issues. It's been through a horrible, torrid time for a long time when it was part of RCL Foods.
Yeah.
So I don't think sentiment's completely ignited for Rainbow. So if I was to pick one for recovery, and also speaking to Martinez Standard after the results, just body language-wise, I'd probably go for Rainbow. I think it's going to get a bit of leverage, and those margins could get fat quite quickly if things align and we get pricing power and a bit of cost reduction.
How much of relief could, I guess, maybe government provide for these players? I mean, there have been, calls from the South African Poultry Association to help deal with the bird flu outbreaks and provide vaccines as well. We've also seen load shedding improve, which has helped these players.
Yeah, well, I think things like VAT exemptions, there's also the I don't want to use the word dumping, but there is still the cheap imports of chicken.
Yeah.
Those are difficult things to deal with for government, but I suppose any decision in that regard would be huge, absolutely huge for them, yeah.
Marc,
significant also.
All right, Marc, thanks so much for your time and sharing your insights on the poultry industry. That was Marc Hassenfuss from Financial Mail.